The moment they fired Daniel Carter, his 6-year-old daughter was sitting in the hospital 3 miles away, waiting for him to come back with enough money to pay for her medicine. Daniel didn't cry when his manager told him. He didn't argue. He didn't even ask why. He simply stood in the conference room with his hands trembling at his sides while the company's HR director slid a white envelope across the table. "Your position is terminated effective immediately." Daniel stared at the envelope, then at the men sitting across from him. "Today?" "I'm afraid so." Daniel swallowed hard. "My daughter is sick." The HR director lowered his eyes. Daniel had worked for Sterling Financial Services for 11 years. He had arrived before sunrise, stayed late, trained new employees, covered shifts, and never once complained when someone else received credit for his work. He was a single father. Everyone at Sterling knew that. They knew his daughter, Lily, had been born with a heart condition. They knew Daniel had spent years balancing hospital visits, school pickups, medical bills, and a demanding job. And still, they were firing him. "Please," Daniel whispered. "Just give me 2 weeks. I'll find another job. I just need time." The HR director looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, Daniel. The decision has already been made." Daniel picked up the envelope. His paycheck had been his family's lifeline. Without it, he had no idea how he would pay rent. No idea how he would buy groceries. No idea how he would afford the medication Lily needed that afternoon. He walked out of the building carrying a cardboard box containing 11 years of his life. A coffee mug. A framed photograph of Lily. A worn notebook. And a small stuffed rabbit she had given him after his last birthday. Outside, Daniel sat on the curb. His phone rang. It was Lily's hospital. "Mr. Carter, we need to speak with you about Lily's prescription." Daniel closed his eyes. "I know. There's a balance due before the pharmacy can release it." Daniel stared at the busy street. "How much?" The number they gave him made his stomach twist. He had less than $300 in his checking account. The prescription cost more than twice that. "I'll figure it out," he said quietly. After hanging up, Daniel sat there for another minute. Then his phone rang again. This time, it was his former boss, Richard Mason. Daniel almost ignored it. Instead, he answered. "Hello." Richard's voice was cold. "Daniel, security says you still have the company laptop." Daniel looked at the laptop inside his box. "I was planning to return it." "You need to bring it back immediately." Daniel slowly stood. "Of course." "And Daniel." "Yes. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Something inside Daniel broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough for him to realize. He had spent 11 years trying to earn respect from people who had never intended to give it. He walked back inside. The receptionist barely looked at him. Daniel placed the laptop on the security desk. Then he noticed something. A young woman was standing near the elevator, crying. It was Sarah, one of the newest employees. Daniel knew her. She was 23, had a toddler at home, and had been struggling to keep up with the workload. "What happened?" Daniel asked. Sarah wiped her eyes. "They fired me." Daniel froze. "Today?" She nodded. "Me and 4 others." Daniel looked toward the conference rooms. "Why?" "Management says we didn't meet the new productivity target." Daniel stared at her. "That target was increased yesterday." Sarah nodded. "We told them it was impossible." Daniel suddenly understood. This wasn't about performance. Something else was happening. He turned toward the elevator. "Who else was fired?" Sarah whispered, "Everyone who complained about the new system." Daniel's jaw tightened. Then another employee walked out of an office. Then another. A receptionist. 2 account managers. A customer service supervisor. People Daniel had worked beside for years. All carrying boxes. All looking confused. Daniel remembered something. 3 months earlier, Sterling had announced a major restructuring. Richard Mason had promised the employees that no one would lose their job. Daniel had believed him. Now he realized that promise had probably been worth nothing. Sarah touched Daniel's arm. "Please don't say anything. They'll blacklist us." Daniel looked at her. Then he looked at the people walking through the lobby. He thought about Lily lying in a hospital bed. He thought about the prescription they might not release. He thought about the years he had spent believing that being a good employee would protect him. Then Daniel took out his phone. Sarah frowned. "What are you doing?" Daniel didn't answer. He scrolled through his contacts. There was one number he had never expected to call. A number belonging to the founder of Sterling Financial Services. Eleanor Sterling. She had retired from daily operations years earlier. But Daniel had met her twice. The first time was when he was a young employee who had made a serious mistake on an account. Everyone expected him to be fired. Eleanor had asked him one question. "Did you learn from it?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then don't waste the lesson." She had saved his job. Daniel had never forgotten. Now he pressed call. Eleanor answered after 3 rings. "Daniel." His voice shook. "Yes, ma'am." "What's wrong?" Daniel looked around the lobby. "I was fired today." Silence. Then Eleanor asked, "Why?" "They said I failed to meet a new productivity requirement." Another silence. "Daniel, you've been one of my strongest employees for more than a decade." "I know." "Who fired you?" "Richard Mason." Eleanor's voice changed. "Richard?" "Yes." Daniel looked at Sarah. Then at the others. "They fired me and several other employees today. People who questioned the new system." Eleanor was quiet. Then she asked, "Are you telling me Richard fired you without my knowledge?" "I think so." Daniel could have stopped there. He could have begged for his job back. He could have explained his daughter was sick. Instead, he said something that surprised even him. "Mrs. Sterling, don't give me my job back." "Why?" "Because there are good people being punished for doing the right thing." Eleanor didn't speak. Daniel continued. "Sarah has a 2-year-old. Marcus's wife just had surgery. Jenna is raising her brother. These people aren't numbers." His voice cracked. "I lost my job today, and I'm scared. I'm terrified. But I don't want to save myself by pretending what happened to them is okay." The lobby had gone quiet. Everyone was listening. Eleanor finally asked, "What do you want me to do?" Daniel looked at the employees around him. Then he said the words that would change Sterling Financial Services forever. "Fire every one of them." Sarah's eyes widened. Daniel immediately added, "Not the employees. The executives who did this." For several seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then Eleanor said, "Give me 10 minutes." The call ended. Nobody moved. Sarah stared at Daniel. "Did you really just tell the owner to fire management?" Daniel gave a nervous laugh. "I might have just made myself permanently unemployable." Then the elevator doors opened. Richard Mason stepped out. His face was furious. "Daniel." Daniel turned. Richard pointed toward the exit. "I told you to leave." Daniel calmly nodded. "I'm leaving." Richard noticed the employees standing around. Everyone back to work. Nobody moved. Richard's face reddened. Then his phone rang. He answered. "Yes." His expression changed. "What?" Everyone watched him. Richard listened. Then his face became pale. "No, Eleanor, wait." The call ended. Richard lowered the phone. A second later, his assistant's phone rang. Then the operations directors. Then the HR directors. One by one, their faces changed. Sarah whispered, "What's happening?" Daniel didn't know. Until Eleanor Sterling walked through the front doors. She was 71, carried a silver cane, and had 2 attorneys beside her. The entire lobby went silent. Eleanor looked at Richard. "You fired Daniel Carter." Richard swallowed. "Eleanor, there were productivity concerns." "Did you fire him?" "Yes." "Without consulting me?" Richard said nothing. Eleanor turned toward the other executives. "And you approved it?" Nobody answered. Eleanor shook her head. "I built this company believing that employees were human beings before they were employees." She pointed toward Sarah and the others. "These people told you your new system was hurting families." Richard tried to interrupt. Eleanor raised her hand. "Yet instead of fixing the system, you fired the people who complained." Richard's shoulders fell. Eleanor looked at Daniel. Then she noticed the photograph sticking out of his cardboard box. "Is that your daughter?" Daniel nodded. "Lily. Is she okay?" Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "She needs medicine today. I don't have enough money." Eleanor's expression softened. "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel looked down. "Because I didn't want special treatment." Eleanor stepped closer. "Daniel, kindness isn't special treatment." She turned to her attorney. "Call the hospital. Take care of the prescription." Daniel immediately shook his head. "No, ma'am. I can't let you." "You can." "But." "Daniel," she said gently, "you spent 11 years taking care of this company. Let someone take care of you for once." Daniel covered his face. For the first time that day, he cried. Not because he had lost his job. Because someone had finally seen him. Eleanor reinstated every employee who had been unfairly terminated. Richard Mason and the executives responsible for the mass firings were removed. But Eleanor didn't stop there. She asked Daniel to meet her the following week. "I want you to lead a new department," she said. Daniel blinked. "What department?" "Employee care and support." Daniel almost laughed. "You're serious?" "Very." His job would be to make sure no employee at Sterling ever felt disposable again. Months later, Daniel stood in the company lobby beside a framed photograph. It showed him and Lily planting a tree outside Sterling's headquarters. Lily had recovered well enough to return to school. The company had created a medical emergency fund for employees and their families. Daniel had helped design it. One afternoon, Sarah walked into his office. She was smiling. "My son got into preschool." Daniel smiled. "That's great. I just wanted to thank you." Daniel shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." Sarah looked at him. "You saved my job." Daniel glanced toward the photograph of Lily. "No," he said. "We saved each other." That evening, Daniel picked Lily up from school. She climbed into the passenger seat and handed him a crumpled piece of paper. "What's this?" "I drew you something." Daniel opened it. It was a picture of him standing in front of a giant building. Above him, in crooked 6-year-old letters, Lily had written, "My dad helps people." Daniel stared at it. His throat tightened. "Do you like it?" Lily asked. He pulled her into a hug. "I love it." And as they drove home, Daniel realized something he would never forget.